There's a particular kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. You can get 8 hours, you can take a day off, you can disappear from your phone for an entire weekend and still wake up feeling heavy. That is because sometimes the body is not tired from doing too much. Sometimes the mind is tired from carrying too much. Other people's expectations, other people's decisions, relationships you keep trying to repair by yourself, guilt from choices you cannot go back and change, responsibility for people you love but cannot rescue. And somewhere along the way, you started calling yourself weak because all that weight finally became too much. But what if you're not failing because you're tired? What if you're simply carrying something that was never yours to keep carrying? Welcome to the Shyft Within, a podcast about mental health, identity, resilience, personal responsibility, and the difficult internal work required to build a life that is honest, meaningful, and your own. I'm Matthew Gendron, and today we're talking about the difference between taking responsibility and taking ownership of everything, because those are not the same thing. We're going to talk about guilt, boundaries, faith, surrender, and why putting something down is not always giving up. Sometimes it's the first sign that you're finally choosing peace. Before we continue, this episode of The Shift Within is brought to you by Transform Your Path. What if real transformation is not about becoming someone new, but letting go of what has been holding you back from who you already are? My friend and transformational mindset coach Lauren Garlinghouse helps people release limiting beliefs, rewrite unhealthy patterns, and intentionally create a life they love. You do not have to remain stuck in thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors that no longer reflect who you are becoming. Because when you change your mindset, you begin changing the direction of your life. If you're ready to let go of what no longer serves you and create what does, connect with Lauren at transform-your-path.com. And now let's get into today's conversation. A lot of us were taught that strength means carrying whatever gets placed on our shoulders. You don't complain, you don't ask for help, you don't let anyone see that the weight is affecting you. You just keep moving. And for a long time, that approach can look like resilience. People may even praise you for it. They call you dependable, strong, selfless, the person everyone can count on. But there is a point where strength can quietly turn into performance. You're no longer carrying the weight because it's healthy, necessary, or even yours. You're carrying it because you're afraid of what people will think if you put it down. You're afraid they will call you selfish. You're afraid someone will leave. You're afraid everything will fall apart without you. Or maybe you're afraid that if you stop moving long enough, you will finally have to feel everything that you've been avoiding. That's not sustainable resilience. That's survival mode wearing the uniform of strength. I understand that mindset. The military teaches you to complete the mission, protect the people beside you, and keep moving regardless of how you feel. In the right environment, those qualities are necessary. They save lives. But when you're carrying the same mindset into every relationship, family problem, and personal struggle, it can become destructive. You begin treating every situation like it's yours to control. Every problem becomes your mission. Every struggling person becomes someone you must save. Every relationship becomes something you must hold together, even when the other person is no longer helping you hold it. Eventually, you stop asking whether the weight belongs to you. You only ask whether you're strong enough to carry more. That is how people disappear inside their own sense of responsibility. Responsibility is not the same as blame. Personal responsibility matters deeply to me. Healing without accountability is incomplete. We have to examine our choices. We have to acknowledge where we hurt people. We have to confront the patterns that continue creating chaos in our lives. We cannot blame every decision we make today on what happened to us yesterday. But personal responsibility does not mean accepting blame for everything that has ever gone wrong. That distinction matters. Responsibility says, I will be honest about my part, and blame says, everything must be my fault. Responsibility can say, I cannot change what happened, but I can choose what I do next. And blame will say, I must keep punishing myself for the past. Responsibility creates movement. Blame creates a prison. You may have made mistakes in a relationship, but that does not mean that every action the other person took was your fault. You may have struggled as a parent, but that does not mean you can control every choice your adult child makes. You may have been the leader, but that does not mean you are capable of preventing every bad outcome. You may love someone deeply, but their healing is still their responsibility. We often confuse caring with carrying. Caring means I will support you. Carrying means I will take ownership of what you refuse to confront. Caring says, I will walk beside you. Carrying says, I will destroy myself trying to walk for both of us. That is not love. It may feel like love. It may even come from a loving place. But when helping another person requires you to abandon yourself, something has become unhealthy. You can care about someone without carrying what they refuse to confront. You can love someone and still establish a boundary. You can want the best for them while accepting that you cannot make their decisions. Boundaries are not abandonment. Sometimes boundaries are the most honest form of love available. Some of the heaviest things we carry are not happening now. They happened years ago. A decision we wish we had made differently, something we said, someone we hurt, a moment when we knew better, but we still chose the familiar pattern, a relationship we damaged, a version of ourselves we are ashamed to remember. We replay those moments because part of us believes that continued suffering proves we are sorry. If we punish ourselves long enough, maybe it will balance the scale. But pain does not automatically produce accountability. Sometimes pain only produces more pain. You cannot demonstrate growth by refusing to let yourself grow. Real accountability is not spending the rest of your life hating the person you used to be. It is becoming someone who no longer repeats that person's choices. That means making amends where appropriate. It means changing your behavior. It means accepting consequences without turning those consequences into your permanent identity. It means understanding that forgiveness does not erase responsibility, but responsibility should lead somewhere. If your guilt is not helping you repair, learn, or change, it may no longer be accountability. It may have become self-punishment. Self-punishment can feel strangely comfortable because it allows you to remain emotionally connected to the past. As long as we are still suffering over it, we feel as though we are still doing something about it. But you're not repairing the past by keeping it alive inside of you. You're simply allowing yesterday to consume another day. There comes a point when you have to say, I was wrong, I take responsibility, I have learned, I am changing, and I will not keep using my worst decisions as evidence that I am unworthy of a different life. You're responsible for what you do next. You are not required to serve a life sentence inside of a moment you cannot change. Letting go sounds peaceful until you actually try to do it. Sometimes the burden has become part of our identity. Who are you if you're no longer the fixer? Who are you if everyone does not need you? Who are you if you stop fighting for a relationship that has become one-sided? And who are you if you admit that something cannot be repaired in the way you hoped? We often hold on because the burden gives us a role. It gives us something to do. As painful as it is, carrying that weight can be safer than facing the uncertainty that comes after putting it down. There may also be grief involved. Putting down the weight may require you to accept that someone is not going to change, that you cannot go back, that the apology may never come, that you did everything you could and the outcome was still not what you wanted. That is difficult because surrender removes the illusion of control. But control and responsibility are not the same thing. You can be responsible for your response without controlling the outcome. You can communicate honestly without controlling how the other person receives it. You can offer support without controlling whether they accept it. You can apologize without controlling whether you are forgiven. And you can pray without controlling when or how the answers will arrive. Your responsibility ends where another person's agency begins. That does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop treating their choices as proof of your failure. I think we sometimes misunderstand surrender, especially when we talk about faith. We imagine surrender as weakness, passivity, or even walking away because something became difficult. But genuine surrender is not pretending that the problem does not matter. It's admitting that the problem matters and that you cannot control every part of it. Faith does not mean denying your exhaustion. It does not mean forcing yourself to smile while you're falling apart. Sometimes faith sounds like, God, I've carried this as far as I can. I need help with the rest. That is not weakness. That is honesty. There are burdens God may be asking you to confront, but there are also burdens you are never asked to claim as your identity. You can take responsibility for your healing without accepting responsibility for everything that hurts you. You can forgive without reopening the door to the same pattern. You can love people without following them into their destruction. And you can believe in restoration without forcing something that requires the participation of another person. Surrender is not abandoning your life. Sometimes surrender is how you finally make room to live it. When your hands are wrapped around everything you are terrified to lose, they are not available to receive anything new. Sometimes the next chapter does not begin with gaining something. It begins with releasing what has already ended. So how do you determine what belongs to you? Start by separating the situation into three categories. The first category is what you need to own. These are your choices, your words, your behavior, your healing, and your next decision. If you caused harm, own it. If you need help, seek it. If you need to apologize, apologize. If you keep repeating a destructive pattern, confront it. This is your work. The second category is what belongs to someone else. Their response, their willingness to change, their interpretation of your boundary, their decision to forgive or not forgive, their healing, their choices. You may be able to influence some of those things, but you cannot own them. The third category is what must be surrendered. The past, the outcome, the unanswered question, the apology you may never receive, the version of the future you were certain would happen, the things beyond anyone's ability to control. Surrender does not mean you never think about those things again. It means you stop organizing your entire life around trying to change what cannot be changed. Ask yourself, what part of this situation is actually mine? What am I trying to control because uncertainty scares me? Am I helping this person or protecting them from the consequences that might finally force them to change? Is my guilt leading to growth or is it keeping me trapped? What would putting this weight down actually look like? Maybe it looks like having an honest conversation. Maybe it means making an appointment. Maybe it means setting a boundary. Maybe it means no longer answering every crisis that someone else repeatedly creates. Maybe it means forgiving yourself, not because what happened was acceptable, but because you are committed to becoming different. Maybe it means admitting that you need rest. You do not have to solve your entire life today. You only have to identify the next honest step. Before we close, I want you to slow down for a moment. Think about the burden that immediately came to mind during this episode. Do not analyze it yet. Just name it. What are you carrying? Whose voice convinced you that it was yours? What does carrying it cost you? Has it cost you peace, sleep, trust, relationships, your health, your ability to be present? Now ask yourself one more question. What would happen if I put down the part that does not belong to me? Maybe someone would be disappointed. Maybe they would call you selfish because your lack of boundaries once benefited them. Maybe you would have to face grief that you had been postponing. Or maybe you would finally have enough energy to begin your own healing. Putting down the weight does not mean you never cared. It does not mean that the relationship meant nothing. And it does not mean that you're avoiding responsibility. It means you are learning the difference between what you are called to carry and what is slowly crushing you. Own what is yours. Make amends where you can. Change the patterns that need to change. But stop accepting responsibility for every person, every outcome, and everything that hurts you. Rest is not failure. A boundary is not abandonment. Forgiving yourself is not avoiding accountability. And surrender is not giving up. Sometimes surrender is the beginning of peace. Your final challenge for today. Tonight, take a piece of paper and finish these three statements. I take responsibility for. I am no longer responsible for. I am ready to surrender. Be honest, even if nobody else ever sees what you write. You do not need every answer tonight. Name one burden. Take one honest breath. Put down what was never yours to carry and give yourself permission to rest. Thank you for spending this time with me on the Shyft Within. If this episode helped you recognize something you've been carrying, share it with someone who may need permission to put down their own burden. If this episode helped you recognize something that you've been carrying, share it with someone who may need permission to put down their own burden. And remember, the shift does not always begin with a dramatic breakthrough. Sometimes it begins with an honest decision to stop carrying what is destroying you. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep doing the work within.